It was a quiet town, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's business. And yet, some stories stayed hidden until the right moment. In this town lived a rancher named Henry, a man of few words, whose life was defined by the steady rhythm of his work. He woke with the sun, fed the animals, repaired fences, and watched over the wide fields that stretched beyond the horizon. People in the town thought he was simple, maybe even a little dull. But those who knew him understood that Henry had a quiet strength, a patience that most people lacked. He never rushed, never demanded more than was necessary. And most importantly, he never judged. Across the hills from Henry's ranch lived a woman named Clara. She was not like anyone else in the town. Clara was unusually tall and strong, her presence commanding attention even without trying. But despite her size, there was a softness about her, a shyness that made her seem almost fragile. She had grown up in isolation, raised by a strict aunt who believed that the world was too cruel and dangerous for someone like Clara. Her education had been limited, not because she lacked intelligence, far from it, but because her caretakers wanted to protect her from the judgment of others. In every way, Clara's world had been small, and she had learned to live quietly, to hide her feelings, and to never question the rules she had been given. When Henry and Clara's marriage was announced, the town buzzed with curiosity. It was not just that Clara was unusual, but that Henry himself was choosing someone so different from what most people expected. Rumors flew quickly. Some people admired the choice, thinking Henry had a kind heart and could see beyond appearances. Others whispered that perhaps Clara was too different, too difficult to manage. But Henry did not care about the gossip. He had seen Clara once, when he had been delivering supplies to her home for a neighbor. And he noticed something that no one else seemed to. She had a quiet dignity, a kind of honesty that radiated from her, even if she was shy or unsure. And in that honesty, Henry saw a person he could trust, someone he could respect. The wedding day arrived slowly, with the sun climbing high in the sky and the gentle wind carrying the scents of the countryside. It was a simple ceremony. There were no grand decorations or lavish arrangements. Instead, there were close friends, a few neighbors, and the wide open spaces that made the ceremony feel like it belonged more to nature than to the world of gossip and judgment. Clara wore a dress that had been carefully stitched by her aunt. It was plain, yet it suited her perfectly, flowing down her tall frame in a way that seemed both elegant and natural. Henry wore his usual work clothes, cleaned and pressed, but still showing the practical simplicity he carried every day. There was no rush, no pressure, only a quiet acknowledgement of the commitment they were making. As the ceremony ended, people clapped and congratulated them. But the air between Henry and Clara was more complicated than celebration. They understood each other in ways no one else did. Clara's eyes revealed a mixture of excitement, fear, and a vulnerability she had rarely allowed anyone to see. Henry, in turn, felt the weight of responsibility. He was not marrying someone he wanted to change or control. He was marrying someone who had lived in a world where her own voice had often been ignored. And he knew he had to honor that voice. There was a moment, standing together as people cheered around them, when both of them realized that this marriage was not just about tradition or appearances, it was about trust. The first night in their new home was quiet, almost painfully so. Clara had never shared a room with anyone in her life, let alone someone she had just married. The house was small, warm, and filled with the smells of fresh wood and the faint hint of flowers Henry had placed on the table. Clara moved slowly, unsure of where to place her belongings, while Henry went about lighting a fire and preparing a simple dinner. Neither of them spoke much, because there was no need for words. Their shared silence held a kind of understanding. Both of them were entering new territory, and both of them were feeling the weight of unfamiliarity. It was then, in that quiet moment, that Clara spoke. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but the words carried a weight that Henry felt immediately. "It hurts," she said. "I can't keep my legs closed." There was no shame in her voice, only honesty, a raw truth that had been bottled up for years. Henry froze for a moment, unsure how to respond, But he quickly realized that her words were not a demand or a complaint, they were a call for help. This was not about romance, or about fulfilling expectations. This was about pain, about the difficulty of living in a body and a life that had never been properly understood or cared for. Henry approached her slowly, kneeling beside the chair where she sat. He could see the tension in her body, the way she flinched at even the smallest movement. But rather than recoiling, he simply held her hand and looked into her eyes. "Tell me what hurts," he said gently. And Clara, for the first time in her life, allowed herself to speak without fear. She spoke of years of discomfort, of moments when her own body felt like a prison, of the loneliness that had followed her from childhood into adulthood. She spoke of the strict rules she had lived under, the belief that she must endure pain silently, and the fear that no one would ever truly listen. Henry listened without interruption, without judgment. He did not offer immediate solutions or advice. He simply held space for her words, letting them hang in the room like fragile threads that needed careful handling. In that act of listening, something profound began to happen. Clara felt seen. She felt understood in a way that had never been possible before. And Henry realized that the bond they were forming was not built on tradition, appearances, or even romance, but on empathy, patience, and the willingness to face difficult truths together. The hours passed slowly. Clara's pain was real, but the presence of someone who cared, who did not try to fix or dismiss her experience, made it bearable. Henry helped her move to a more comfortable position, adjusted pillows, and simply stayed with her. In that small, intimate moment, a new kind of connection was formed. It was not the connection of a typical wedding night, filled with expectation and ritual. It was a connection rooted in trust, in the acknowledgement that true partnership requires seeing and responding to the reality of the other person's life. By the end of the night, Clara felt something she had never known. Relief. Not because the pain was gone, but because someone else was willing to carry a part of it with her. And Henry felt a quiet pride, not in conquering or achieving, but in being present, in holding space for the truth. They were both exhausted, emotionally and physically, but there was a sense of calm that neither had expected. The wedding, the ceremony, the outside world, all of it, faded into insignificance compared to the importance of this moment. For the first time, Clara understood that her life did not have to be defined by isolation or silence. And for the first time, Henry understood that his role was not to control or direct, but to support and witness. As they settled into sleep, the fire dying down to embers, there was a shared understanding between them that their journey together would not be simple. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of fear, but there would also be patience, trust, and the quiet strength of knowing that they were no longer alone. That night, the rancher and the giant bride discovered that marriage, at its core, was not about tradition or expectations. It was about seeing each other fully, accepting each other's struggles, and choosing to face life together with compassion. In the morning, the sunlight streamed through the windows, painting the room with a golden glow. Clara awoke, feeling a little lighter, a little braver. Henry, already tending to the animals outside, looked up at her with a gentle smile. They did not speak of the previous night immediately, because some things do not need words to be understood. Instead, they went about their day side by side, each movement and gesture filled with the quiet knowledge that their bond had deepened in ways neither had anticipated. The town may have whispered about them, but in that house, in that shared silence and understanding, a new kind of story was beginning. One built not on appearances or expectations, but on honesty, empathy, and the courage to face life as it truly was. The morning after their wedding had a quiet, reflective feeling. Clara woke slowly, the sunlight spilling softly across the wooden floor of their small home. The previous night's tension and honesty had left her exhausted but also strangely lighter, as if a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying had been lifted just by being acknowledged. She looked around the room, taking in the simplicity of their surroundings, the plain furniture, the well-worn rugs, and the soft hum of the wind moving through the open windows. Everything felt calm and safe, and for Clara, that was a new sensation. Safety had not been something she had known much in her life. Most of her experiences had been governed by rules, by fear, by the constant need to measure every movement and every word against someone else's judgment. Henry was already outside, tending to the animals. He moved with the steady rhythm that Clara had come to admire. Each action, from feeding the horses to checking the fences, was performed with careful attention and patience. Watching him, Clara realized how different he was from anyone she had ever known. He never rushed, never complained, and seemed to notice the smallest details about the land and the animals he cared for. She felt a growing respect for him, but also a quiet relief that he did not demand things from her she was not ready to give. She understood in a way she never had before that Henry's strength was not loud or forceful, it was steady, patient, and grounded in a deep sense of responsibility. Clara rose from the bed slowly, aware of her body in a way she hadn't been able to before. The pain she had felt the night before was still present, but she no longer felt trapped or ashamed. Instead, she felt the possibility of being helped, of having someone see her struggle without judgment. She moved to the small basin of water in the corner of the room, washing her face and hands carefully. Each motion reminded her of the life she had lived, quiet, controlled, cautious, but now she sensed that things could be different. She could take small steps without fear of immediate punishment or criticism. Henry noticed her movement from the doorway. "Good morning," he said gently, his voice carrying warmth without being overbearing. Clara smiled faintly, nodding in response. There was no awkwardness, no forced intimacy, only a mutual understanding that their connection was not defined by expectation, but by presence. Henry handed her a simple cup of tea, its warmth comforting in her hands. They sat together quietly for a few moments, listening to the distant calls of birds and the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. Once they finished, Henry suggested they take a short walk around the property. Clara hesitated at first, unsure if she could manage the physical strain, but Henry did not push. Instead, he offered his arm gently, and together they moved slowly along the dirt path that wound through the fields. As they walked, Clara began to speak, sharing small details of her childhood, of the life she had lived in isolation. She spoke of her aunt's strict rules, of the long hours spent reading by candlelight, and of the longing she had felt for human connection that never fully came. Her voice wavered at times, but Henry listened without interruption, nodding, asking gentle questions that encouraged her to continue. Henry shared some of his own life as well. He told her about the challenges of running a ranch alone, about the nights he spent repairing fences in the dark, about the pride he took in caring for the land and animals. Clara listened attentively, surprised by how much she enjoyed hearing someone speak openly about their life without pretense. It was the first time she had encountered someone who could share truth without hiding behind fear or expectation. As they walked, the bond between them grew stronger, built on shared vulnerability and trust. Over the next few days, they began to settle into a rhythm. Henry continued his work on the ranch, and Clara found ways to help, taking small tasks that allowed her to feel useful without pushing herself too far. She fed the chickens, watered the plants, and helped prepare meals. Each task, though simple, gave her a sense of accomplishment and belonging. Henry noticed her efforts, praising them quietly but sincerely, which encouraged her to continue trying. Clara realized that for the first time in her life, she was able to contribute without fear of criticism or disappointment. Despite the growing comfort between them, Clara's physical pain remained. She tried to ignore it at first, but Henry gently reminded her that it was important to acknowledge it rather than hide it. One evening, after a long day, Clara sat down and explained everything she had been feeling, from her discomfort to the strain on her body that had lasted for years. Henry listened closely, taking in every detail. He did not rush to find a solution or dismiss her concerns. Instead, he simply sat with her, showing her that her pain mattered, that it was valid, and that she did not have to endure it alone. This process of sharing and listening became a daily routine. Clara discovered that speaking openly about her struggles brought a sense of relief. Each time she expressed herself honestly, Henry responded with patience and understanding, never pushing her to do more than she could handle. The emotional burden she had carried for so long began to lighten, replaced by a growing sense of safety and acceptance. Henry, in turn, felt a deeper connection to Clara, understanding that his role as a partner was not to control or dictate, but to support, witness, and protect. One afternoon, Clara suggested they take a trip into the nearby town. She had never been outside her isolated home for anything beyond necessity, and the idea filled her with both excitement and nervousness. Henry encouraged her, assuring her that they would move at her pace. The trip was slow and cautious, but it allowed Clara to experience the world outside her sheltered life for the first time. She marveled at the sights, the sounds, and the people she encountered, realizing how much of life she had missed. Henry remained by her side the entire time, providing comfort and reassurance when she felt overwhelmed. During the visit, they also went to a small clinic. Clara had long suspected that her discomfort might be more than normal, but she had never had the chance to seek help. Henry accompanied her, supporting her through the process of being examined and asking questions. The doctor listened attentively, acknowledging Clara's experiences and explaining potential causes and treatments. For the first time, Clara felt that her struggles were not a personal failing, not something she had to endure silently, but rather a condition that could be understood and addressed. The experience was empowering, and she left the clinic feeling hopeful for the first time in years. Back at the ranch, life continued with a new rhythm. Clara took small steps in caring for herself and her home, learning to recognize her own limits and communicate her needs. Henry continued his work, always attentive to her pace and comfort. Their relationship deepened, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through the steady accumulation of trust, care, and understanding. They learned to navigate the challenges of daily life together, finding joy in shared meals, quiet evenings by the fire, and the simple beauty of the surrounding landscape. Evenings became a time of reflection. Clara would sit by the fire, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply sitting in silence, feeling the warmth and presence of Henry nearby. They talked about hopes, fears, and plans for the future. And in those moments, Clara felt a sense of belonging she had never known. Henry, too, found fulfillment in these quiet times, recognizing that partnership meant being present and attentive, not just taking action. As weeks passed, Clara grew stronger, both physically and emotionally. She was learning to trust herself, to trust Henry, and to trust the possibility of a life different from the one she had known. The ranch, once a symbol of work and routine, became a space of healing and growth. Henry's patience and empathy allowed Clara to explore her own potential, to discover the strength within herself that had been hidden by years of isolation and fear. Through it all, the bond between them deepened in ways neither could have anticipated. Clara realized that true connection was not about physical proximity or following societal expectations. It was about honesty, empathy, and the willingness to share life fully, even when it was difficult or uncomfortable. Henry understood that love and partnership required listening, patience, and the courage to face challenges together. By the end of this period, Clara and Henry had established a foundation of trust and understanding. Their days were filled with the steady rhythm of ranch life, small acts of care, and the ongoing process of emotional and physical healing. They had learned that true intimacy was not about meeting expectations, but about creating a space where both could be fully themselves. And in that space, they discovered a sense of peace and connection that neither had known before. The weeks following Clara's first visits to the clinic brought a new sense of hope, but also new questions. Her body still felt unfamiliar, carrying aches and limitations she had long ignored. Henry remained a quiet but constant presence, helping her adjust to each day, encouraging her to listen to her own needs and recognize when rest was necessary. For Clara, this attention was a revelation. She had never known a world in which her comfort and well-being mattered so much to someone else. All her life, she had been told to endure, to obey, and to hide her struggles. But now, with Henry, she began to realize that her life could be different. It could be one where honesty and care were more important than appearances or tradition. One morning, After breakfast, Henry suggested they make another trip into town. This time, it wasn't just for errands or supplies. Henry had arranged for Clara to meet a specialist who could better understand her condition. She felt a mix of nervousness and curiosity. She had always been careful about what she revealed to others, worried that people would judge her or dismiss her pain. Yet, with Henry by her side, she felt a courage she had never experienced before. The journey to the clinic was quiet, filled with the sounds of the countryside, the distant crow of crows, the rustling of trees, and the soft crunch of dirt under their feet. Henry walked beside her, matching his pace to hers, giving her both support and space. At the clinic, they met Dr. Lewis, a doctor known for his gentle demeanor and thorough approach. Clara explained, slowly and carefully, the discomfort she had lived with for years. She described the tension in her muscles, the way her body sometimes felt heavy and uncooperative, and the worry that something was wrong but no one had taken her seriously before. Dr. Lewis listened attentively, nodding and asking questions that showed he genuinely wanted to understand. Henry stood beside Clara, occasionally clarifying details or helping her explain things that were difficult to put into words. The doctor reassured her that her experiences were real, valid, and not a result of anything she had done wrong. After a series of careful examinations and discussions, Dr. Lewis explained that Clara had a rare condition affecting her muscles and connective tissue. It wasn't dangerous, but it required careful management and therapy. He emphasized that her body had endured years of strain without proper care, which had made daily movement and comfort more challenging than for most people. Clara listened quietly, a mix of relief and concern on her face. Relief, because she finally had an explanation for the discomfort that had plagued her for so long. Concern, because she realized there would be effort and patience needed to manage it. Henry, seeing her expression, reached out to hold her hand. "We'll face this together," he said softly. One step at a time. The discovery was transformative for Clara. For the first time, she had validation not just of her physical struggles, but of her experiences as a person who had been largely unseen. She began to understand that her life didn't have to be limited by fear or misunderstanding. There were solutions, strategies, and people willing to help her navigate her challenges. Henry's quiet support was a steadying force. He helped her practice exercises recommended by the doctor, reminded her to rest when necessary, and always encouraged her to listen to her body. Back at the ranch, their daily routine began to include both physical care and emotional support. Mornings were for gentle movement, stretching, walking slowly around the yard, and tending to animals in a way that accommodated Clara's needs. Afternoons were spent learning about the land, helping with manageable tasks like planting, feeding chickens, or preparing meals. Evenings were for reflection, reading, or simply sitting together by the fire. In this rhythm, Clara began to notice small changes. She could stand longer without discomfort, move more freely, and even smile more easily, free from the constant tension that had characterized her past. Henry, too, learned from the process. He discovered that true partnership was not about following expectations or achieving results quickly. It was about patience, observation, and the willingness to adjust his own actions to meet Clara's needs. He watched her closely, learning how to support her without being overbearing, how to encourage her growth without pushing too hard. The trust between them deepened, strengthened by the shared understanding that their relationship was built on care, not control. One afternoon, as the sun cast golden light across the fields, Clara and Henry worked together to repair a section of fence that had fallen in a recent storm. Clara moved slowly at first, unsure if her strength and balance were sufficient. Henry offered guidance and steady hands when needed, but never rushed or criticized. Step by step, they rebuilt the fence, each post and plank a symbol of the new life they were creating together. By the end of the day, both were tired but satisfied. Clara felt proud, not only of the work accomplished but of her ability to participate fully in a task she had once thought impossible. Henry felt proud of her as well. Not for what she could do, but for her courage in facing challenges she had long avoided. Evenings brought reflection and quiet conversation. Clara would often share memories from her childhood, moments of fear, moments of wonder, and moments when she had longed for someone to notice her struggles. Henry listened with care, sometimes offering insights, sometimes simply holding her hand and allowing her to speak. These conversations became a cornerstone of their relationship, helping Clara to understand herself and her past in a new light. She realized that the pain and isolation she had endured were not her fault, and that she could move forward with the support of someone who truly cared. As weeks turned into months, Clara's confidence grew. She learned to trust her own judgment, to recognize her body's signals, and to communicate her needs clearly. Henry continued to be her anchor, offering steady encouragement and unwavering support. Together, they navigated the ups and downs of daily life, from minor setbacks in her physical therapy to small victories in managing tasks that once seemed impossible. Each success, no matter how small, was celebrated quietly, reinforcing their bond and their sense of shared purpose. Their connection was also strengthened by shared experiences beyond the ranch. They visited neighboring towns, attended local markets, and engaged with the community in ways Clara had never imagined possible. Each outing was carefully planned to accommodate her needs, and each was a lesson in courage and adaptability. Clara discovered that life beyond her isolated upbringing was not to be feared, but embraced with care and preparation. Henry's presence provided comfort, stability, and encouragement, showing her that the world could be navigated safely when shared with someone who cared deeply. Through it all, Clara and Henry's relationship evolved from one of simple partnership to a profound friendship and mutual respect. They discovered that intimacy was not defined by tradition or expectation, but by the steady acts of care, understanding, and trust that filled each day. Clara learned that vulnerability could be met with patience, not judgment. And Henry learned that love was expressed as much in listening and observing as in action. By the end of this period, the couple had established a new way of life. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of healing, growth, and shared discovery. Clara had found strength and confidence she had never known, and Henry had discovered the deep fulfillment of supporting someone fully and honestly. Together, they faced challenges with patience, celebrated victories with humility, and built a relationship founded on understanding, empathy, and mutual respect. In the quiet of the evening, as they sat together watching the sun dip below the horizon, Clara reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. She had gone from a life of fear, silence, and isolation to a life of trust, support, and possibility. Henry's steady presence had made all the difference, showing her that life could be approached with patience and compassion rather than fear and control. For the first time, she felt fully seen, fully understood, and fully capable of embracing the future. Henry, watching her, understood the significance of their journey. It was not the milestones of work or achievement that mattered most, but the quiet victories of trust, patience, and understanding. Together, they had faced difficult truths, acknowledged long-held fears, and created a life in which both could thrive. The discovery of Clara's condition had not been a moment of despair but a turning point, guiding them toward a deeper connection and a fuller understanding of each other. In these months, they learned that true partnership was not about grand gestures or perfect outcomes. It was about presence, patience, and the willingness to walk alongside someone in every moment of struggle and growth. Each day brought new lessons, small victories, and the deepening of a bond that could withstand challenges, setbacks, and uncertainties. Through listening, care, and consistent support, Clara and Henry discovered a form of love that was steady, enduring, and transformative. As the months went by, life on the ranch continued with a new rhythm, one that Clara and Henry had created together. It was a rhythm built on understanding, patience, and mutual respect. Each day brought its own small challenges, but it also brought small victories, moments of laughter, and the quiet satisfaction of shared effort. Clara's confidence had grown steadily. She could manage tasks that once seemed impossible, and she was learning to trust her own body in ways she never had before. She began to feel a sense of independence, even as she leaned on Henry for guidance and support when necessary. Henry, for his part, continued to be a steady presence, He had learned that his role in their partnership was not to control or direct, but to observe, encourage, and support. He watched Clara carefully, noticing the subtle changes in her movements and moods, and adjusted his own actions to meet her needs. He had come to understand that love was not about grand gestures or dramatic displays, but about the quiet, consistent acts of care that built trust and strengthened their bond. One afternoon, after a morning of work tending the animals, Clara suggested they take a walk to the nearby hills. She had been looking forward to it for days, eager to experience the world outside the ranch in a way she never had before. The sun was warm, the air filled with the scents of wildflowers and fresh grass. Henry walked beside her, matching his pace to hers, offering steady support when the path became uneven. As they reached the top of the hill, Clara paused to take in the view. Rolling fields stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with trees and intersected by winding streams. It was a sight she had only imagined in books, and seeing it in reality filled her with awe. "I never thought I'd see anything like this," Clara said softly, her voice filled with wonder. Henry smiled, understanding the significance of her words. For her, this was more than a walk. It was a step into a world she had always feared and avoided. It was proof that life could be beautiful, even when it was challenging. They sat together on a large rock, watching the sun move slowly across the sky. And for a moment, there was no past, no pain, no fear, only the present, shared between them. Back at the ranch, they continued their daily routines, incorporating lessons from Clara's therapy and medical guidance into their work. Henry taught her techniques to reduce strain while lifting, bending, or walking long distances. Clara practiced exercises that strengthened her muscles and improved her balance. The process was slow, and there were days when she felt frustrated or discouraged. But Henry's unwavering support made the difference. He reminded her to focus on small victories, to celebrate progress, and to be patient with herself. Slowly, she began to see improvement, not just physically, but emotionally as well. As their relationship deepened, Clara began to open up about her dreams and aspirations. She spoke of her desire to learn more about the world, to engage with the community, and to use her strength and knowledge to help others. Henry listened carefully, encouraging her to take steps toward those goals at her own pace. Together, they made plans to visit nearby towns, attend workshops, and participate in local events. These experiences gave Clara a sense of purpose and belonging, showing her that she could contribute meaningfully to the world around her. The town, once skeptical of their marriage, began to see the couple in a new light. People noticed Clara's growing confidence and the care Henry showed in supporting her. Slowly, whispers of gossip were replaced with admiration and respect. Clara discovered that her voice mattered, that she could be heard and valued, and that her experiences and abilities had significance. Henry, too, found fulfillment in witnessing her growth, understanding that true partnership meant creating a space where both individuals could thrive. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Clara reflected on how far she had come. She had transformed from a shy, isolated young woman into someone capable of facing challenges, expressing her needs, and embracing life with courage. Henry watched her, feeling proud not of what she could do, but of who she had become. He understood that their journey was not about fixing problems or achieving perfection, but about growth, understanding, and shared effort. The dinner they prepared together was simple, yet it symbolized the harmony they had created, a partnership built on respect, trust, and love in its purest form. Over time, they also began to explore new hobbies and activities that brought joy and creativity into their lives. Clara discovered a love for gardening, planting flowers and vegetables in carefully tended plots. Henry taught her how to care for the soil, water the plants, and harvest the produce. They found satisfaction in seeing the fruits of their labor grow, knowing that each plant represented patience, attention, and collaboration. Even small successes, like the first bloom of a flower or a ripe vegetable ready to harvest, became moments of celebration, reinforcing the bond between them. In addition to physical and emotional growth, Clara began to develop a stronger sense of independence. She learned to manage her own therapy exercises, to plan her days with consideration for her body's needs, and to make decisions about her own care. Henry continued to support her, but he also stepped back when appropriate, allowing her to take control of her own life. This balance of support and autonomy strengthened their relationship, showing both of them that true partnership involves both guidance and freedom. Their evenings often included reflection and conversation. They shared stories from their pasts, dreams for the future, and thoughts about the present. Clara spoke of the fears she had overcome, the lessons she had learned, and the hope she now carried. Henry shared his own experiences, including the challenges of running a ranch and the satisfaction of living a life guided by patience and care. These conversations created a foundation of trust and understanding, allowing both of them to feel safe in expressing their thoughts, fears, and desires. One day, Henry suggested they host a small gathering for neighbors and friends. Clara was nervous at first, worried about how people would perceive her, but Henry reassured her that their home was a place of acceptance and kindness. The event was simple, filled with laughter, conversation, and shared food. Clara discovered that she could engage with the community, offer her skills and knowledge, and feel valued. The experience reinforced her confidence, showing her that she could navigate social situations with grace and composure. Through all these experiences, Clara and Henry's relationship matured. They faced challenges together, celebrated successes, and learned to communicate openly and honestly. Clara discovered that her body and her experiences were not limitations, but parts of her unique story. Henry learned that patience, empathy, and quiet support could foster growth and strengthen bonds in ways that expectations and pressure never could. As the seasons changed, so did their lives. Spring brought new growth to the fields and gardens, symbolizing the personal growth they had achieved. Summer brought long days of work and discovery, reinforcing their partnership through shared effort and collaboration. Autumn brought reflection, as they watched the leaves turn and fall, reminding them of the passage of time and the importance of living fully in each moment. Winter brought quiet evenings by the fire, offering space for introspection, planning, and deepening their emotional connection. By the end of this period, Clara had transformed in ways she had never imagined. She had developed strength, confidence, and resilience. She had learned to trust her body, her instincts, and her voice. Henry had grown as well, understanding that true love and partnership were expressed through patience, care, and a willingness to face challenges together. Their life on the ranch was no longer defined by fear, isolation, or uncertainty, but by trust, understanding, and the quiet joy of shared effort and companionship. In the evenings, they often sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. Clara would reflect on the journey she had taken from a life of isolation and pain to a life filled with hope, growth, and connection. Henry would observe her, understanding that the journey had changed both of them, bringing them closer together and teaching them the value of patience, empathy, and partnership. In those moments, words were unnecessary. The quiet presence of each other, the shared understanding, and the mutual respect they had cultivated were enough. Their story, once filled with uncertainty and fear, had become a story of resilience, compassion, and love. Clara had discovered that life could be approached with courage and hope, and Henry had discovered that true partnership required more than strength. It required understanding, empathy, and patience. Together, they had faced challenges, celebrated victories, and built a life rooted in care and respect. As the years went on, Clara and Henry continued to grow together. They encountered new challenges, of course difficult seasons, unexpected setbacks, and moments of doubt. But each time, they faced them with the tools they had developed: patience, communication, and unwavering support for each other. The ranch, once simply a place of work, had become a symbol of their shared life. A life built on trust, growth, and the quiet, enduring power of love. In the end, Clara realized that what she had once thought of as weakness, her struggles, her fears, her isolation, had become the foundation of her strength. She had learned that vulnerability could be met with care, that challenges could be overcome with patience, and that life could be shared fully and meaningfully with someone who truly understood and respected her. Henry had learned that true partnership was about more than physical presence. It was about emotional investment, consistent support, and the willingness to face life together in all its complexities. Together, they had created a life that was rich in understanding, compassion, and shared purpose. The story of the rancher and the giant bride was no longer one of fear, misunderstanding, or isolation. It had become a story of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of care and partnership. And in the quiet moments, as they watched the sun dip below the horizon and felt the steady rhythm of life around them, they knew that they had found something rare and enduring. A life built not just on survival, but on trust, love, and the courage to face the world together.